Welcome to the interior analysis ranked video for the IP crossover mashup trend video. So if you are new here, I have a few video essays that cover some recent trends in movies, and this one is about the IP crossover mashup trend, which is not a very good name for what this is. It's at least not very marketable or catchy, but I think it does encapsulate what it is. So that video is half an hour long, and it's not required viewing for this ranking, but it's a bit more in-depth, and I'll be going into... I'll at least allude to some stuff that I talk about in that in this ranking video. So I'm just going to be going from worst to best. I kind of had my hand in the wrong place for that, but worst to best for these 12 movies, and ranking them. It's going to be really just my opinion based. I am a bit more objective, if we want to use that word, in the video essay. This is just going to be my opinion, and I'll go into some stuff that didn't make it into the main video in this. So let's get into it. At the bottom, number 12, and I apologize to people, Ready Player One is my least favorite movie in this trend. It is one of my least favorite movies ever. If you are a fan of this movie, you should skip this part probably, because I might be about to ruin it for you. And it's probably going to be the most I talk about any of these movies, because I have a lot to say here. So first of all, one of the worst protagonists of all time, Wade Watts, is so bland. And I hear that that's a little bit worse in the book. I should say I have not read the book, and I have no plans to, because I hate this movie so much. And I hear they're similar enough that I won't like the book. He is just so milquetoast and like such an obvious, like, almost fan service protagonist that's supposed to be like, here's your guy, nerds. Here's your generic white guy that represents all nerds. And he is just written that way all the way down. That's an easy nitpick. Another easy one, and I'm not the first to say this, but it's still really dumb, so I'm going to say it anyway. The way they get the first Easter egg by driving backwards in the Mario Kart equivalent of the Oasis. Apparently it's taken somebody like however many years, 6 years or something, to think to do this. With the amount of speedrunners and like people who try out every glitch in a video game, there's whole communities of people who do this online in real life. With that kind of culture, it would have taken somebody absolute maximum 10 minutes to try driving backwards. I bet somebody would have tried it in the first race. It's just so, like, hard to buy that it's taken somebody this long. Like, this kid's a genius because he thought to drive backwards and nobody else did. Get the hell out of here with that. That is just so hard to buy. And I'm not even like tapped into gamer culture like that. I'm not very good at gaming. I would not have been the one to think of that. But somebody would have. And a lot of them are the people who are watching this movie. Those are easy nitpicks. Why I hate this movie is the way it treats our relationship to stories. So this is supposed to be like the peak of nerd culture. And you're getting all your characters, all your favorite movies, all the like 80s songs that our dads have nostalgia for. That's all here. Every bit of nostalgia ever. This is nostalgia the movie. Buckle up, have fun. In itself, I don't hate that. But it expands out to create this ethos within this movie and this story world that is very antithetical to how I... like the sort of value that I think stories have. In the world of this movie, apparently the real world is just awful. Like it's falling down the drain, and everyone just goes to the Oasis as a form of escapism. And I feel like that is how all like stories and characters are treated in both the text and subtext of this movie. It's just like, they are fun and we like them, and that's why they have value as pure escapism. And I really hate that ethos. I'm not saying that Spielberg or Ernest Cline necessarily believe that, but I think that is sort of the theme that they are expressing here. And there is value in stuff that's just pure entertainment, but stories are so much more than that to me. And especially when you put that against, like, we're not going to try to fix the world, we're just going to try to escape from how bad it is. There are so many stories out there that are meaningful to us because they encourage us to look at the world in a new way, or to imagine a better world, or to better ourselves. That is what makes most of my favorites my favorites. To take a couple of pretty easy examples, this is based on a real event, but why I love Spotlight is because it encourages us to look at our institutions and how we interact with them and how we as individuals do our jobs, and examine how doing those with more integrity is capable of making the world better. Again, that's not so much of a nerdy example. That's not the kind of thing that would never be included in Ready Player One, which is fine. I don't want it there. But Ready Player One seems to be dismissing that kind of effect that a story can have. Or to take something that could be in Ready Player One, take a story like Black Panther, the specifically the movie, but also kind of like that character as a whole. The world of Wakanda is kind of this brilliant, creative, and subversive idea of this country that exists in Africa and is very deeply steeped in African culture, but hasn't been touched by colonization. That is a subversive idea that helps us imagine a world that is better and different from the one that we live in. And, Black Panther doesn't show up in Ready Player One. That movie came out, I think, less than a month before Ready Player One did. I think if Black Panther did show up, it wouldn't speak to any of that. And I'm not sure if you can do that in a cameo. I'm not saying they should have done that in the cameos. But they just kind of pile on these added layers of dismissing that sort of effect that media and stories and characters can have for us. Characters that either show us, like, I don't really feel any connection to this character, but a lot of people look to Superman as a character that is sort of aspirational. Like, he is all-powerful and he uses that power for good. Or, for something that I am attached to, a character like Harry Potter, the way that those stories explore, like, both, societal things like the rise of fascism, or individual experiences like dealing with childhood trauma and, all the different things that he faces, like battling the dark side of him that he's had basically since birth with the curse that Voldemort gave him. Those are very deep themes that story deals with, and it allows us to have a very personal relationship to those stories, and also to kind of societally, when we talk about those stories, like that fandom, when we talk about the stories themselves, they kind of give us like a sort of shared language to point at some real world things. Like, I remember somebody comparing the Charlottesville March to the Dark Mark showing up in the fourth book of that series. I promise I'm tying this back to Ready Player One. That's like the sort of power that storytelling can have. And I know that would be a lot for something that is just kind of trying to be fun, like Ready Player One, to shoulder. But I really wish that it had tried to examine that, because it doesn't seem interested in at all. And in fact, it seems to almost think that those sorts of stories and those sorts of functions are kind of pointless in terms of engaging with media. It's just like, have fun playing video games. And, for me personally, like, I don't engage with games because it is very gamer coded. Like, I talk about like how many characters show up in it. That's most of the focus of how I talk about it in the video. But a lot of that movie is kind of steeped in online gaming. And I have never really had an emotional experience playing a game, aside from, getting frustrated that I'm not doing well at it. But I have friends who have told me about really deep storytelling that games can do. And the closest that this movie gets is at the end. I forget what game he plays to, like, win the third Easter egg and get the keys to the chocolate factory. But he does kind of say something like, the point is just to keep playing, it's not to win. That, like, approaches the sort of thing that I'm talking about. I don't think it's enough. And I don't like how this movie presents that. Because if this is the celebration of nerd culture, then it's basically just saying, like, here you go, Easter eggs. And I think that's a very cynical and shallow view of the power that storytelling has. I know I waxed a little bit philosophical there, and some of you might be thinking, like, it's not that deep, bro. Like, Ready Player One was never going to be that. I know. It also could have been. And I really wish that it at least, like, didn't dismiss that kind of stuff out of hand. So I think I'll leave it there for that part. A couple of other things, and this isn't so much like a criticism, but I think this movie had a lot of potential in having a really deep character story. Like, I am not personally super interested in the idea of the Oasis, like, as a story world. But I do think it presents a very good opportunity for a really unique character story. So there's this line that Wade says in, like, the opening voiceover when he's introducing the Oasis to the audience. He says something like, people come to the Oasis for all the things they can do, but they stay for all of the things they can be. And that line goes almost entirely unexplored in the movie. I think the book might do a little bit more with it, but from what I've gathered, it doesn't do a ton. Imagine if that was the approach to a protagonist that this movie had taken. I think that would have been infinitely more interesting, especially in context of my real world sucks, but I can escape through the things I enjoy. Imagine, just for like a pretty simple example, imagine if our protagonist for a Ready Player One story that's, maybe you erase what you know about Ready Player One and just say, like, a story about characters set in the Oasis. Imagine if this character is like a non-binary kid who lives in a culture that doesn't accept that identity and, like, actively suppresses it. And they love escaping to the Oasis and just, nerding out on the things they enjoy, whatever thing that might be. And through doing that, and through engaging with the stories or games or whatever that they like, and through meeting people with those shared interests, that kid is able to explore a side of themselves that they aren't in the real world, and is able to become a more fully realized version of themselves through the people they meet through shared interest and through the things they enjoy. I feel like that's a much more true experience to, like, how powerful engaging with nerd culture can be. I have heard anecdotes about people having similar experiences to that. And I think, that's just one example that I'm giving, but I think you could expand that out into all kinds of other things. That would be a really interesting character story that I don't feel like we've seen. The world of the Oasis presents, like, a perfect opportunity to do that. And, I'm not saying they should have done exactly that, especially with how Hollywood tends to be about queer characters in huge budget movies. They're far from doing that at this point. I still think that, like, something closer to that approach, at least, could have been a much more interesting version of this story. Just, like, examining how we can help form our identities in whatever way that might take through the stories and characters that we love. I really wish this had cared to explore something like that. But instead, we just got 3 million Easter eggs. and wasn't that fun. Maybe for some people, not for me. I will never talk about this movie again, especially after having done this trend. It is on a very short list of things we will never cover on the podcast. So, that's the end of that. I hope you had fun. Fans who like it, you can come back in the room now. Number 11 is the Emoji Movie. So I think many of us remember when this movie was first announced, when we first heard about it, and we were like, wow, that sounds like a bad idea. Then it came out, and it turned out it was a really bad idea. So I jumped on that bandwagon pretty hard. So that movie came out the summer before I went to college. And then when I got there, there was this girl on my floor freshman year who had seen it and like unironically loved the Emoji Movie and would talk about it a bunch. And anytime she brought it up, I was just like, there's no way it's good. Like, I haven't seen it. I don't need to see it. I know that this movie is bad. And eventually I decided, you know what? I don't think I can keep saying this until I actually watch it. So after some amount of months, like, it was on Netflix, and I was like, all right, let me just see what this is actually about. And if it is as bad as I assume it is. And it was. But I did kind of learn from actually sitting down and giving it a shot. One, that, like, you shouldn't be dismissive of something you've never seen. Like, you gotta actually watch it. I kind of watched Ready Player One for the same reason. I didn't expect to like that movie, but I just kind of wanted to be sure and to be informed about it. That is something I do as a critic. I don't recommend that most people who are just casual fans do that kind of thing. It also gave me a lot of respect for the people who made this movie, because they were doomed from the start. This is a pretty much unadaptable premise. Like, you can't make a good version of it. But they tried. And I really respect their trying, because, like, as bad as this is, I mean, maybe I could write a better version of it. I have no intent of trying. But I don't think the best version of this movie is actually that far off from what they gave us. So, props to them there. Props to the animation team. Like, you guys were fighting a losing battle. This should never have been made. But you did the work and you made it. And I think that's commendable. This is also probably the worst, like, outcome of the Lego Movie's success, is that people felt like they could make a movie like this and people would like it. Like, the Lego Movie kind of tricked people, mainly studio heads, into thinking that they could make something like this, or this doesn't exist yet. I don't know if it ever will. But I've heard, mostly through the podcast script notes, that apparently some studio owns the rights to the Uno movie. I don't even know where you begin to make a movie about Uno. But I think the reason that's even being talked about is because of the Lego Movie. And this should be a warning sign to anybody who legitimately thinks about making the Uno movie. This is why you shouldn't do that. It's so bad. I could get into a bunch of it. Like, it's really stupid that the movie ends with the main emoji, like, making multiple faces at once, and the main character, like, sends that multi-faced emoji to the girl in his class that he likes to, like, rizz her up, and that's how the movie ends. I'm not kidding. Look this up. And literally, like, they make it seem like this is such a, like, revelation, and all he's done, all the main character has done, can be accomplished by just sending 6 emojis back to back. Like, it's so stupid. It's also, I think, one of the best examples, and we get a few more of these in this trend, of why you should not do theme if you don't really have anything to say. I don't even really remember what the theme of this was. I do remember how flat it fell. It's very clearly trying to, like, follow Inside Out and be like, people have more than one emotion, and that's okay. That just doesn't work when it's emojis. You just can't do it. It's not the same thing. I wish I could be a little bit more, like break that down further, but, like, we know what emojis are, and it's just not conducive to that kind of story. Nobody needed me to tell them to stay away from this, but it's as bad as you've heard. Don't feel like you have to waste your time on it. Number 10 is Pixels. So if you got to the end of the video essay, you saw my friend Matthew's fantastic review of Pixels that he went way harder than I expected to on. And that is better than anything I'm about to say or anything I did say about it in the video. Shout out to him for making that review. Shout out to him also for sitting through that movie a second time with me, because I had heard him like talk about it when we were just like hanging out a few months before, and then I decided to make this video, and I realized I was going to have to watch Pixels for it, and I was like, hey, I kind of have to do this for a video I'm making. Do you want to watch it together? And I kind of owe him one because, well, okay, I got him back because I brought him to Interstellar in IMAX, which I think, I didn't explicitly say this to him, but I think that makes up for it, putting him through the experience of watching this movie a second time. So it's really bad. I'm not going to try to one-up anything that he said. I will give this 1 point of praise, because I actually think this has some really good visual effects work. I don't know a ton about how visual effects are made, but the way that they incorporate like the pixelated characters into the real world settings, I think looks pretty good. Like, it looks well integrated, and there's some shots where like Pac-Man's eating a car and it turns into like pixels that fall away. That looks really good. It looks like the next step forward, like the slightly higher budget version of the kind of effects that are in Scott Pilgrim. You know, as big as the budgets are on a lot of these movies, I don't like how a lot of them look. One more point of criticism for Ready Player One, I think that movie looks kind of bad. And there's a few, like Space Jam 2, I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. I don't think that looks very good. This kind of does. You know, I don't necessarily enjoy looking at, like, the 3D pixelated versions of the 2D characters. I don't need, like, a 3D big pixel version of Donkey Kong. But I think they did a good job on it. And I can't actually say that for a lot of the movies in this trend. I also think this could have been good. Like, unlike the Emoji Movie, I think this is a premise that could work. I don't know that I would have personally loved it in its best form, but like, if this was actually fun and had good jokes, it could have been decent. So, I don't think we should get a take two, but like, I do want to say that much for it. So let's move on to number 9. Deadpool and Wolverine. I'm not going to talk too much about this one because we did a whole podcast on it right after it came out. So you can hear most of my thoughts there. And they are balanced out. I do not like this. I know a lot of people are probably mad that I put this as low as I did. If you're familiar with our podcast, my co-host Jelani loves this movie. He like gave it an instant 10 out of 10 despite acknowledging its faults. So, and we had a guest on for that. So like my negativity is balanced out in that episode. So I'm not going to like go too much more into that here. As an actual viewing experience, I think it's pretty mid. Like, it's got a few good jokes, a couple of fun action scenes. I mostly dislike it because of, like, what it shows about the current state of the industry and what it could mean for the industry moving forward. It mostly, I think, means that we're just going to be stuck here for a while longer in this, like, reboot, recycling old characters and stories and like not promoting things that are original. I think because it made $1.3 billion or whatever, it's just gonna like keep us where we are, which is kind of frustrating because I've felt like we're kind of climbing out of that era, but probably it's gonna last a little bit more. So I dislike it more on like a meta industry level than I actually like hate the experience of watching it. It's probably lower than it deserves to be, but I mostly just hate what this movie represents. I apologize to all of you fans who wanted it higher. You can yell at me, but I stand by it. You can especially yell at me for the movie I'm about to have one spot above it. Number 8 is Space Jam 2, a new legacy. I'm a little softer on this movie than most people, probably not as harsh as it deserves. Some of that might be because the one time I watched it in its entirety, I was conscious for the whole thing, but I was working a restaurant job at the time that this came out, and I had stayed at work and had a few drinks with my coworkers, so I got home pretty late at night and still fairly drunk. I decided that oh, Space Jam 2 came out yesterday. That feels like a good thing to watch while I sober up. I think that was a good state to be in to enjoy it. I do enjoy a couple moments of it. I did grow up watching some Looney Tunes, so it at least hit my nostalgia there. I do hate that they made them 3D and that they were self-aware about it. And the Michael B. Jordan joke is good. I said that in the main video. The Fury Road sequence, I still really like it, as cynical as it is. I do think this movie is bad, though. It has a lot working against it. And, we could have had a good, fun Space Jam 2. It probably wouldn't have been groundbreaking, but the original wasn't. It's just a thing that, Gen Z and young millennials have nostalgia for. And I think that's okay. That movie doesn't, overreach what it's meant to do. But this one kind of does. Partly because it's trying to be an HBO Max ad, like I talked about in the video. But also because, again, this is another reason of don't do theme when you don't care about it. Because this movie tries to do several themes. It tries to do this whole family drama with LeBron. And just don't do that with LeBron. He's not an actor, and that's okay. So don't ask him to act that hard. I don't know why they decided to do that, because it really drags the movie down. It also does not know what it's trying to say about, essentially commenting on this trend, basically. It's kind of saying, oh, corporations like Warner Brothers are bad for making this, but also we made it, so have fun. But also Don Cheadle is the villain, who's an AI, who's making cynical choices. But that's also the choice that we made by making this movie. What are you doing? It's just so confused. And strangely enough, I think it's actually a really good thing that this movie is as bad as it is. Because I'll talk about Ralph Breaks the Internet in a little bit. But I think if this had been another thing kind of on the level of Ralph Breaks the Internet, it wouldn't have received such a big backlash. And it wouldn't have taught studios to back off. Because I think the Lego Movie and Ralph Breaks the Internet tricked studios into thinking they could make Space Jam 2 and get away with making a movie that doubles as an advertisement and just throws a bunch of characters together cynically and have that be your whole movie. So I think it's kind of a blessing in disguise that it was this bad. I wish they had done that with a movie that was a little more like the Emoji Movie and was always doomed to be bad. Because we could have had a fun Space Jam 2. And now we don't get to. So RIP to that. I probably will never rewatch that movie in its entirety, but there's a couple of clips from it that are fun. So moving on to number 7, we have Free Guy. I don't know that anyone's going to be upset at me for putting this here. I think it might be lower than where some people would put it. I am not really a fan of Ryan Reynolds' recent career, as evidenced by how far down I put Deadpool 3. So I really only talked about the one crossover scene in this movie when I brought it up in the video, where he uses Captain America's shield and the lightsaber on the Hulk hands, because that's kind of the only thing that was relevant to that conversation. So to talk about the movie more as a whole, this is another one that I think is just very hypocritical in its theme. And again, it shouldn't do theme because it doesn't care about it, but I'll get to that in a minute. So this really claims to be all about originality and supporting small creators and their ideas, but it just reeks of being tailored for commercial viability. Like, you can feel that in the cast. You can feel it in the one moment that I used the same clip of like 8 times in the video. And it's just such a like premise that you can feel studios loving. It's like, what if an NPC in a video game like Fortnite could be a player? It sounds just very marketable. Like, it's one of the very few original choices, like original stories, that a studio would probably feel safe about making, especially when you attach the very bankable Ryan Reynolds to it. Some of my dislike of this movie is that I'm just frustrated that this is what passes for an original movie now, because it feels very uninspired, honestly. There's also a very dumb theme in this movie about, like, so they have this whole thing where, like, gamers should be nicer to NPCs because, like, the NPCs in this game are, like, basically AI characters that can, like, grow, I guess, and that's why Ryan Reynolds can, like, basically be a player and has some kind of autonomy. Cool, that's fine, but then they expand it out into, like, be nice to NPCs, and I guess that's supposed to be, like, be nicer to each other online, which is a message I can get behind. But this is a really bad metaphor for it. Like, one of my pet peeves is the theme that comes up in sci-fi all the time of, like, using robots or AI characters as a metaphor for marginalized or oppressed people. Because I feel like that doesn't work. I think it works when you do it with aliens because they're actually alive. But when you take it with something that's, like, manufactured like a robot that is only given sentience because we, as its creators, decide it does. And I know some people are going to refute me on this, but I feel like that just... I bump on that theme every time, even if I like a couple movies that sort of do explore it. That works even worse here, though, with NPCs. NPCs are just people that you're meant to have a quick conversation with, or, you know, is your ally, or most of the time is just the Koopas that you jump on when you're playing Mario. We do not have to be nice to NPCs. That is not a problem with gaming culture. So it's just, like, such a toothless theme that I wish they had just left to the wayside. And this is a problem that I have with a lot of Ryan Reynolds projects is, again, I don't know if this is him, but I've seen it in, like, a number of his movies. There's always this sense that they feel like they should have a theme because that's a thing that movies have, and or a thing that good movies have, and we want to be good. But they put it so far down the list of priorities that it just always ends up feeling super tacked on, and they'll just bring it out as, like, this blunt force hammer to get a character to go do the plot when they can't think of anything else. I didn't mention that as a criticism of Deadpool and Wolverine, but I think that's a problem with all 3 Deadpool movies. And I wish they would, again, just, like, if you're not going to focus on theme, then don't even put one in. I think that's better. I think no theme at all is better than, like, a poorly developed one. To be nice to this movie, I do really like the relationship between Jodie Comer and Joe Keery's characters. Like, that was fun. They're really cute together. And if the whole movie was about that, I think I would actually like it. And that's pretty much the only reason it's as high as it is on this list. Because somehow, despite a lot of the other stuff that doesn't work about this for me, I did like that. So now we'll go to number 6, which is Ralph Breaks the Internet. I mostly talked about the negatives for this movie in the main video, mostly the Disney Plus advertisement sequence. I do like some things about this movie, mainly the character story with Ralph and Vanellope. So I kind of mentioned that, like, I think the main reason this movie exists is to be a Disney Plus ad, and I stand by that. This is a really good character story, though. It is good enough that it kind of offsets some of the things that I dislike. Not entirely. I think I still gave this, like, a 2.5 out of 5, or 5 out of 10, whichever metric you prefer. But this is a good character story about just, like, 2 friends growing apart who, like, are essentially taking different career paths and managing to maintain a relationship after moving away from each other. And I think that's just a very true experience that people tend to have as adults. You know, I moved a lot as a kid, but I feel like it resonates a bit more with, like, an adult version of that experience. And it felt like it comes from a very true place, like the way that it's written in this. And I'll probably talk at the end of this video, once we're done with the ranking, about these movies' different takes on the internet, whether literally or like in a more metaphorical sense. But this one I feel like is positing that like the internet is good for connecting people who can't be together physically, which I think is maybe the most wholesome take out of any of these movies. It also does a lot of like internet-based jokes. So this was actually a movie that I was kind of excited for when I first heard about it, because I think it like the first trailers were dropping like just after I saw the Emoji Movie. And I was like, oh, this is going to be like the Emoji Movie, but good. And kind of it is. And I meant that in the sense of like, it's going to make internet jokes that are actually like funny and insightful and not just cringe. They're better than the Emoji Movie, but they still kind of feel like 40-year-old parents trying to use slang that their 14-year-olds use. It's not like so bad about that, but it has a little bit of that energy. And I think I saw this in theaters, and I think I liked it a lot more at the time. I did rewatch this one in its entirety before making this video, and it didn't hold up super great for me. There's also this part where it like screeches to a halt to have Wreck-It Ralph read a bunch of mean internet comments about him, and then he just kind of like shrugs it off, and they go about the rest of the movie. I'm not mad that they like don't have it go anywhere, but if it's not going to go anywhere, like, why do you feel obligated to put that scene in? Like, it feels obligatory, and I don't know who is asking for that. It might be like the remnants of an earlier draft, but you're not beholden to that. Just drop it. I'm pretty neutral on this on the whole. Like, it's a little rocky. The lows are pretty cynical, but it does get me at the end with the character story. So it's a rocky 2.5 out of 5. Moving up, we have Wreck-It Ralph 1. So we're back to backing these. I don't have much to say about this. I think it's mid. It's fine. I don't really have anything to criticize it. It just doesn't really hit for me. But I think it's a worthy animated movie. The references are a little more tasteful here. It does feel like more of a just celebration of like classic games, kind of like how Pixels could have been. But it mostly leaves that to the wayside. And I think they also probably like didn't dare to do a bigger crossover because this was a pre-Lego movie entry, the only one before the first Lego movie, and it hadn't really been proven that could be done yet. I also don't think it's what they wanted to do with it originally. Like, the Disney crossover in the second movie feels kind of shoehorned in. It doesn't really feel like what these characters were made for, because I'm pretty sure that it wasn't. I think they were like made with creative integrity. So I don't knock this. It ranks probably right in the middle of my like Disney animated movies list. I haven't bothered actually ranking them, but I imagine it would be right in the middle of it. Not the worst, but far from the best. 5 out of 12 here for the ranking. But my like rating would be, 6 out of 10, 3 out of 5. Okay, and now we get to the stuff that I actually do like, which is a first for these trend videos. I have not really like enjoyed any of the other ones I've covered. These next 4 movies are an exception to that. I did enjoy these. The Lego Movie 2. This is the first of these movies that I would actually rewatch willingly. It doesn't have all the magic of the first one, but it's still pretty fun. It's still just kind of doing the same thing a little bit less, which is an excusable crime for most sequels. Like, a lot of them struggle to recapture the magic of the original. I don't fault this for not being able to do better. The fact that it worked once is pretty unexpected and commendable in its own right. So it's just a little bit more of that. I'll talk about the like more emotional story, like the character story of the first movie, but the way they extended into this is still pretty good, with the like conflict between the brother and sister, especially like if you grew up with siblings. especially ones that are like close in age to you. I feel like this just hits. Maybe only children don't see it. I liked it as like a, metaphor for the story. Again, it doesn't hit quite as hard as the first one, but I was like, yeah, I'm here for it. That's good. I don't think they should make a third one. I don't know that there's really more to do with it, and we have other Lego movies, and like I said, I think we should just stop making this kind of thing. But this was a worthy sequel, so not a ton to say on that, but would recommend. Number 3 is the Lego Batman movie. So I saw this with a couple friends as part of a very short-lived thing we were trying to do, where we wanted to watch all of the Michael Cera movies, and he plays Robin in this, so this counted as one of them. I think has nothing to do with the trend, but I think we back-to-back this with this awful movie called Lemon, which stars the like jerk husband from Fleabag. If you know that show, I don't recommend you watch Lemon because it was just like really artsy in a way that didn't work for me. Anyway, this movie is pretty fun. I don't have a ton to say on this one either, but it has fun and doesn't overstay its welcome. I've criticized a lot of these for not committing hard enough to their emotional stories and like they should just cut them. This doesn't have the absolute strongest like emotional character story, but they give it enough time that I feel like it's worthwhile. Like, I'm not mad they included it. I also, in the original conclusion of like the first earlier draft that I did for the main video essay, I talked about how these movies could be good for like re-examining our relationship to some characters, like especially long-standing ones. And I feel like this is pretty much the only movie in this trend that actually does that. I think the Barbie movie does it too, where they kind of, both the Lego Batman movie and the Barbie movie kind of level like the criticisms that have been made of this character in real life, and sort of hashing those out and examining like, how do we make a healthier update of this character. And I think you actually kind of see that continued into the newest Batman movie from Matt Reeves, that came out a few years after this with Robert Pattinson. They, and they're just having fun in this one, but they kind of say like, hey, yeah, Batman's a little bit of a toxic guy. Maybe we should step away from this version of the character. And, this has a bit more freedom to do it because it's kind of a non-canonical version of Batman because he's Lego. And it can kind of do it because it's a kid's movie that is just kind of going balls to the wall and can kind of be a little bit meta like that and reference every other version of Batman that's existed very explicitly. But then I think you get in the 2022 Batman movie a bit of a response to what they do in this movie, where that version of Batman is kind of having to examine like, oh, maybe I am not really the symbol of hope that I like purport to be. And I really hope that we continue that into like the sequels to that movie. But I think this was the starting point, so I credit it for that as well. Number 2, almost done here. Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers. So this was surprisingly good. This, I think, might have been the last of the movies that I watched for this trend. I love Andy Samberg and The Lonely Island. I think they have a really great balance of fun and goofy comedy, and also still doing like good character stories, like, and that holds true in like basically everything I've seen Andy Samberg in. I watched a lot of Brooklyn Nine-Nine while I was like making the graphics for this video, and like Andy Samberg's just fantastic, and the Lonely Island team, like, just they're so great. If anyone hasn't seen Hot Rod or Popstar Never Stop Never Stopping, highly recommend. And I also recommend this. I think this just has fun, and that's really like the secret sauce to it. It's not trying to be an advertisement. It's not trying to rebrand Disney, because it was kind of a smaller movie for them, which still cost $70 million, which is not small. But they put it on Disney Plus directly, so they clearly didn't believe in it. too much. But this was a good time. It's not perfect. It's not gonna like make the top of anyone's lists, really. This is the only one that even comes close to topping, I think, for anyone, like this specific list that I'm making here. I think it's a little underrated. I would rewatch it at some point. I said something earlier about the way Ryan Reynolds does theme and like more dramatic character moments in his movies. And I don't want to point to him too specifically, but like just movies that he's in tend to exhibit that sort of annoying approach to theme. The Lonely Island stuff, I feel like, is a much better like way of doing what I feel like he tries to do. Like they're still goofy and they're fun, and their main focus is comedy, but instead of like the drama and the thematic moments feeling tacked on, they do feel like they've spent sufficient time to like make those good and make the like character changes come from actual internal motivations within the characters. And I think that holds true for this movie. Like, it's not the deepest story ever, but there's a good just character story about these two like showbiz friends that the band broke up years before, and now they're getting back together. Like, that's Pop Star Never Stop Never Stopping kind of has a similar story, but like they do a good job with it, and I'm here for it, especially when it's John Mulaney and Andy Samberg voicing the Chipmunks and sounding like themselves instead of like the frickin' Alvin and the Chipmunks type of chipmunks, which are so annoying, and I will never watch those movies. Anyway, this is underrated. I expect that this is the movie that any of you watching this are least likely to have seen, so it's the one I'm going to recommend the most strongly. And rounding it out is the original Lego Movie. I don't think anyone will be surprised that this is at the top of the list. I think it's the best one. It's very creative. It was so surprisingly good that it gave us awful imitators like Space Jam 2 and the Emoji Movie that should never have been made. But I think that almost like speaks better to how well this movie works. So I mentioned the like brother-sister story allegory. Allegory feels like too big of a word, but that like parallel that they do in the second movie. So that starts, of course, with the father-son story that they're doing in this one, where like it's the kid playing with his dad's Legos, and like in his imagination the bad guy is kind of a stand-in for his dad, and like they come together at the end. I don't know how obvious of an idea that was when they were making this, but it just works. And this might be more of a personal thing for me, but I really like it when like high emotional stakes are also shown with high physical stakes. That's like a thing that often works for me. Inside Out does it really well, where like you have the visual of like this entire city collapsing in like the mindscape, but what's like literally happening in the story is just like this 11-year-old is kind of losing part of herself. But I feel like this is a great technique to make it hit harder. At least it works for me. There's a lot of episodes of Community that do it really well too, like the Floor is Lava episode, where like you have these like huge action movie style of like filmmaking that's happening, even though the stakes are as like literally small as these two friends aren't going to see each other for a long time anymore. It like just sends home how big of a deal it feels to them, and that really resonates with me. I think this movie does a really good job at that as well, with like at the end you kind of lose the like in-world stakes of, oh no, like all of the Lego characters are going to get glued down, but then you get it replaced with the more grounded emotional stakes of like this dad is connecting with his son now. And I think that's just it just works for me. I don't know if that's good for everyone, but like this movie got a good response, so clearly it works for some people. It's also one of the few movies that makes Chris Pratt tolerable for me. This was before he was in everything, and he's fine here. I don't dislike him in this. I do dislike how many things they're casting him in, though. And that's partly because of this movie. It also proves how goated Lord and Miller are, because there are so many bad versions of this movie that could have existed, and this feels like one of the few good ones, and we were lucky enough to get that. And then they gave us Spider-Verse a few years later, and I cannot wait to see what they give us after, because their track record is pretty damn good. Aside from Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, but that's just a me thing. That movie's not bad, it just grosses me out. So, that's the end of the ranking. So there was one other thing that I wanted to just touch on, because I noticed that a lot of these movies have different like versions of the internet that they present, whether literally or in sort of a metaphorical sense. And I thought that was just kind of interesting to look at. So a couple of them have like the literal internet, like the Emoji Movie or Ralph Breaks the Internet. I don't know that there's a ton to say about the Emoji Movie version of it. It's just kind of like, at least in terms of the literal internet. But it does sort of take a very generic look at like texting culture and how we interact with our smartphones, which is a terrible premise for a movie, of course. I did kind of realize what an interesting comparison that movie is to Eighth Grade, the Bo Burnham movie, because they're both about, a 14-year-old who is chronically online, and they even came out within a year of each other. And it's just so interesting that, like, one of the first lines in the Emoji Movie is, like, Alex is 14, so his whole life takes place on his phone, which is a very cynical line to open a movie with. But Eighth Grade, like, takes somebody who has a very similar experience and is at, like, the same point in her life and is just so empathetic and, like, explores that experience and that character, whereas this movie is just, like, fart jokes for kids. So, I don't think the Emoji Movie should have been Eighth Grade, and I don't think it ever would have been. But it's just interesting that, like, those are such different movies that essentially have, like, a very similar presentation of their protagonist. I kind of already mentioned what I think Ralph Breaks the Internet, like, its take on the internet is. That one is probably the most literal interpretation, in the sense that, like, they show a bunch of different, like, apps that, like, I think when they first enter the internet, there's, like, the Amazon store or something is, like, shown, or, like, there's Twitter birds, and I think we just see, like, a bunch of logos for, like, IMDb and eBay. There's a whole plot point with eBay in it, and it takes a very, very generic, like, view of social media culture, where half the plot is just Ralph gaining a whole bunch of likes for plot reasons. It again feels like a very, like, watered down basic interpretation of the internet, but I do think it does have kind of a wholesome take on, like, the internet can connect people who cannot physically be together, which again, not a bad way to go about it. It's certainly a more wholesome take than the rest of these. Space Jam 2 kind of has a take on the internet. They go to the serververse, and again, that movie is so thematically confused, I'm not even sure if I can, like, give a coherent take on, like, what it's saying about the internet, but it seems to be mostly focused on the, like, studio marketing side of things. Your main villain is an algorithm. So if I remember that movie better and I looked more at those aspects of it, I might be able to say something more cohesive, but it's so confused about what it's trying to say that I'm not sure if that's terribly worth examining. But it is kind of another take that one of these movies presents. Free Guy probably has the most, like, realistic take on it, in the sense that, like, it's all based around an online video game that's basically Fortnite mixed with GTA, I think. I've never played GTA, so don't quote me too hard on that. But that's just the thing that people do in real life. And it seems to be replicating that type of game pretty well. Pretty faithful or like grounded interpretation. I think it's also, like I said, it's kind of trying to say like, be nicer to each other online, but it's so weak in its theme that it doesn't do that very well. Ready Player One, I kind of talked about already, like the unrealized potential of like exploring your identity through online spaces that movie provides, or the Oasis as a story world provides that kind of landscape, and the movie does nothing with it. It also kind of like the Oasis, I think, is a pretty easy one-to-one metaphor for the internet. It shows us in that opening like all the different things you can do there, and a lot of them are things you can do online. You can like go to the casino, travel the world to some extent. You can do a bunch of online gaming, and you can nerd out about stuff. And this movie is really only interested in the like mainstream gamer experience of it. Like they talk about you can like go climbing the Himalayas, or you can surf like a giant wave. We never see that side of it. We only really care about like the gamer things that it does. There's also like, this is kind of another thing I hated about it. Sorry to rag on it more, but like it's so confused about its take on like our relationship to being terminally online, where you have all these shots of like people neglecting their real lives by being in like the VR headsets, and like the mom's dinner's burning, and like all these kids are like running out on the streets with like their hands up like they're shooting because they're all in the Oasis. And it feels like the undertone of those shots specifically are like, this is really bleak and we should touch grass more, I guess, or something. But then, like I said before, like the ethos of the movie is like, but these people are the heroes, and the most terminally online person wins. So it's a little confused in what it's saying. And like, I don't think it's trying to say anything about internet culture, but it is certainly informed by it, but it seems to only really take from the like nerdy side of the internet. Yeah, so that was all the ones that I thought had like a take on the internet. I didn't really want to include that because it wasn't relevant to what I was talking about in that video. I just thought it was kind of an interesting pattern that I noticed across a few of them. If anyone wants to go make a video about like that, I would be really interested to see it. And I think you could like throw in like 8th grade, throw in maybe The Social Network, and probably like Ingrid Goes West, and maybe Inside from Bo Burnham. Like put all of those together and just kind of look at, and maybe that Andrew Garfield movie Mainstream that I haven't seen but looks really interesting. I feel like you could put all of those together and just kind of look at like different takes on internet culture. I don't think I'm the right one to make that video, but I'm going to call them out on the off chance they see this. That sounds like a perfect video for Broy Deschanel. You guys, I think, could make a fantastic video about that. You may consult me, and I hope that you will, because that would be cool. So I think that's it. If you disagree with me, let me know. I hope that all of you watching this haven't seen all of these movies, because there's some of them that I really strongly do not recommend, as evidenced by this list. But let me know what you think, and check out the video essay if you haven't. Especially if you made it all the way to the end of this, because I think it's much more thought out. If you didn't notice, also just a little bit buzzed during this, so not at my most coherent. And check out the other video essays. It's all on here. I'll have links to the Deadpool and Wolverine episode. I'll have that be recommended at the end here in a second. And all of our podcasts are over on the second channel, which is new as of pretty recently. Like, I did that since putting out the actual video essay. Our episode on Clue should be out by the time this drops, and we will have an episode on Mulan soon. Really excited about that one. The original good one, not the live action bad one. But yeah, check out the Patreon, check out all the things in the description, social medias, all the links are there down below. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. The next video is probably going to be about Mission Impossible, the whole series. And I'm excited for that one. I think it's going to be good. And I'll be doing another ranking video like this.